Hello, everyone, and before we start today's episode, I just want to let everyone know that for this week we used a different recording method than we normally use. So it'll sound not like our typical episodes. So Dylan may even sound like Marge Simpson at some points. Our guest this week is John Russell from the bands Gnawing and Alright. And I wanted to say Gnawing has a self-titled cassette which you can get from Hilltop Recordings, and Alright has a new EP called On the Outs, also released on cassette, and that is from Black Numbers Records. Please enjoy the show. We have a ton of really great conversation, and check out his records.
You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Punk Lotto Pod, the game where no one wins. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I am your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And today we're joined by a special guest, so we'll let him introduce himself. So, who are you and what do you do?
Hello, I am John Russell, a longtime friend and family friend of the Hensleys. And I currently play in the band Gnawing, and I play in the band Alright from North Carolina.
Awesome. Yeah, we've known you for, has it been 10 years yet?
Something like that.
Oh, pretty close, I think. It was around 2009, 2010 that we met. So yeah, I think we can go ahead and say a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I think it's the first time we met in person was when your band Calloused played show we booked. Was that the Matahari show?
Yeah, that was Matahari.
Yeah, Matahari, Bay of Pigs, and just Calloused, or do we have someone else?
Did Cold Heart play? I don't remember.
I think Cold Heart played too. Did y'all didn't play that, did you?
No.
No, it was a weird one.
I don't think we ever ended up playing with y'all. I think we wanted to, and then it never worked out. Both of our bands broke up at the same time.
Yeah, I think it was one of those, we had just played the show before, and we were like, well, we can't book ourselves on every show.
Well, and I think probably the guitarist and drummer had gone back to school, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Like that week. Because I don't remember them even being at the show, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens.
That was a good show. Matahari were awesome.
Yeah.
And Bay of Pigs were really good. Did they ever wind up doing much more after that?
No, I think they did like a short run with Torch Runner, and I think they broke up after that.
Yeah.
But then they all like split in like two groups, formed two new bands, and I think they lasted even shorter than Bay of Pigs, and like neither were nowhere near as good. Like that, Bay of Pigs was just a really good combination of like a lot of things that everybody was really into in 2009.
Yeah, it was like fuzzy, but kind of fast. Like it wasn't full on High on Fire, but there was a hardcore edge to it too. Yeah, they were really good, and
yeah.
I think we found them looking at Torch Runner stuff. So
yeah, that totally makes sense. That's
yeah,
sick.
It's weird that we didn't play that show. Looking back now, I was like, who gives a shit? We could have played. Nobody.
Right.
We could have played every show.
Yeah, It was Hickory.
Yeah.
Nobody knew.
We should have let Cold Heart play every show because they were bringing all the dumb kids out.
Yeah.
That band.
And then we. Yeah.
It was all we had.
I looked that dude up too. The guy in front of that band. He's like a car kid now. He's just all into cars.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and then I've seen just about every one of your other bands. Oh, I haven't seen Gnawing yet live.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen Viewfinder and Earth Mover and Planet Creep.
Yeah.
And I've seen them all.
You know, you're a John Russell collector.
Yeah, I'm a stan.
You definitely stand John Russell. You'll see Gnawing soon. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I know you played in Charlotte not that long ago, and I was like, I wish I could go. I can't remember. I probably had to work and didn't have vacation time for it. Because my job is one of those where if you don't have the vacation time, you get a call out.
Stern no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you.
And I probably was like, I just called out a week ago
I can't do it.
for my shitty knee.
It happens.
Yeah.
All right, 1983.
Yeah. So the way we do this show is we pick 1 year at random and then an album and an EP from that year using the Rate Your Music punk charts. This week we got 1983. And what does that year look like?
So I pulled up the list and that you sent me, and I was like, did he not send the punk charts?
Yeah.
Because the first three, I was like,
thing.
whoa.
I saw, yeah.
So number 1 is Violent Femme's self-titled album.
Yeah.
That's a good album, but I wouldn't call it a punk album.
It's a great record. I definitely wouldn't. I mean, it's like, I think that it was one of those ones where, like the way that it was released was punk, and like the idea of kind of that like Minutemen thing where it's like it's punk because it's breaking up the norm.
Yeah.
Because by '83, hardcore had become a formula.
Yeah.
And like, It was like every punk itself, like just regular punk, had become a formula. So I think like it's punk to put out an acoustic record, but it was wild to me that was the top from 1983. I also didn't know that record was that old. For some reason, I thought that record came out in like '96 or something.
Because that's when Blister in the Sun like had a resurgence for some reason.
Yeah, like when we were kids.
Like it was like I think they re-recorded it and re-released it. And
it must have been in like a commercial or something too.
I would have felt this was like maybe '89, but
yeah, at the earliest.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it could be part of that REM scene, maybe.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But
speaking of Violent Femmes, they are playing in Phoenix in like I want to say in July.
I think they're playing in Richmond too.
With X, and it is already sold out.
Damn.
Wow, that is really awesome. Because
they're putting out a new record too, I think.
They put one out a couple years ago too. You guys remember? You know why we think they're a '90s band? It's because they were on Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
There we go. Exposing the real truth.
Which makes it even weirder that they were on that show.
Yeah, because at that point they were already like 10 years old.
Yeah, it's just funny. Yeah, like looking at these. Number 2 is the Chameleons, Script of the Bridge. I'm unfamiliar with the Chameleons.
Oh man, it's a great record. But again, not really punk. It's very disco-y post-punk, like the drummer plays that one beat the whole time, the like swishy hi-hat, it's like very, very like British post-punk. It's a great record. It gets a little like the guitar where it gets like a little psychedelic leaning, which is cool for like if you wanted. It's like Joy Division if they like had souls and drank coffee,
And speaking of Joy Division, number 3 is New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies.
Yeah.
Is that the New Order album?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm really shocked that's not number 1 on this list.
Yeah, over Violent Femmes is still just kind of messing me up that it's there. I'm good for them. They deserve a win.
I'm wondering too if we filter it through rated by members in the United States. So I wonder what happens when you switch it to worldwide.
Yeah.
Nope. Still same order.
Still the same order.
That's weird. You think that would have affected it, but yeah, that record rules. I mean, I guess it's kind of post-punk, just due to being Joy Division spinoff.
Right.
So I guess that one makes sense to be on here. Number 4. This is like a killer, like 4-run album.
Yeah, this is the top 4 is crazy here.
So it's Wipers Over the Edge, the best Wipers record, right? Like,
it's my personal favorite.
That's always hard for me. I feel like every Wipers record, when I listen to it, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite one. But I love Over the Edge, but I still stand behind Is This Real? I think that was like, that's like one of the most perfect punk records ever made, ever. Like that
Yeah.
is like the definition of like they, you know, like recorded it themselves. He had no intentions of it being a real band. Like that
Yeah.
is just such a good picture of the Wipers. But I do love Over the Edge. I love how crazy he got with like composition and like, you know, just like huge roaming, like almost Neil Young-y guitar parts, you know?
Yeah.
We covered their album. What was that one called?
You did one of the later ones, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Going Blind?
Follow Blind.
Follow
Oh, yeah,
Blind.
yeah.
I wanted to say The Circle, but yeah.
At that point, I think it was like just Greg. I could be totally wrong, actually. I feel like maybe they've stayed the same lineup.
We looked at it, and there were somebody from Over the Edge is on that album too. I think it's like maybe the drummer.
Yeah, I feel like the drummer was the only consistent.
There was some consistency through the 80s, and then maybe like I think maybe everything after The Circle is when it starts to be just different people. And
Gotcha.
Yeah, because he did those solo records, and then reunited the Wipers with different people. And,
Yeah.
Number 5 is a band I've never got, like, and I don't know, maybe you have Rudimentary Peni, Death Church.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I get why it's that high. It's a pretty sick record, and I think the cultural impact, I think that was kind of the one that like got Rudimentary Peni like in, you know, a lot bigger of a scope.
Yeah,
but it just doesn't. I don't know. Like that whole scene of like, I don't know. Some of that stuff just like hits and misses for me.
The crass inspired narco.
Yeah. I didn't want to say the C word, but yeah, any crass inspired band is like, all right, I get it.
Are you not a fan of crass, or what's that?
Oh, I love crass. Oh. I like have like a very specific memory of being in high school and hearing Feeding the 5,000 for the first time and like, holy shit! Like I think they're great. I think they spawned a lot of terrible things in the punk world. It's that Fugazi syndrome where it's like the template is so good that you can't, like, if you start a band in 2019 and the first and primary influence is Fugazi, it's just gonna sound like a bad reggae rock band. Like there's the context for everything is totally lost.
Yeah, you need also their unique idiosyncrasies as
right
musicians.
And same with Crass, like the early Crass records that are just like screaming over bad drum beats. Like if you put that record out now, people would be like, what the like go get GarageBand, learn how to record a guitar track, you know? Like I think it's just like lost. And so like even by 83, I think starting a copycat band of Crass is just kind of like, I don't know, didn't work for me. I know a lot of people that love that band. Good for all of them.
Yeah. Do you care about The Fall?
They're chill. I like them. I think they're cool.
They're on this. They're always on the front page on literally every year we do.
Yeah.
On this show.
They have a ton of music.
I feel like they are a band that was made for people that rate music on Rate Your Music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're one of those like important footnote bands.
Yeah. That only music nerds really care about.
Yeah. Kind of the same with Chameleons too, I feel like.
Number 11, we've got Rock for Light by Bad Brains.
Yeah. Isn't it that weird master?
Yeah. I had an OG pressing, like a first press of that for a long time. And only recently it was like, I haven't listened to this in so long, and so I sold it. Because, like, I don't know. I just didn't need to have it, but it's still my favorite Bad Brains record.
Right.
But that master is weird. They, like, sped it up to make it faster, and so it's like, like HR's voice is, like, an octave higher than it normally should be.
Yeah. I listened to it on Spotify, and I was like, what? Why does it sound wrong? It was like chipmunks were singing Bad Brains.
You can't hurt me. Why I'm gonna be safe.
And aren't all these songs on another album before? Like
most of them are on the Roar tape.
Yeah, right. That's what it is.
Which a lot of I almost prefer some of the versions on the Roar tape to this version. But what makes Rock for Light perfect to me is the dub songs on this one.
Oh, right. Uh-oh.
We lost John.
We'll have to let him call back in. You there?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Lost signal or something.
Damn.
Well, luckily
you guys missed my master class on the rhythm section of the Bad Brains.
We'll edit it together seamlessly, and no one will even know.
Perfect.
Should we take that as a sign that we should hop into our album?
Yeah.
Let's run through real quick. Is there anything like huge that you think you have to mention?
Nah.
Earth AD Wolf's Blood by Misfits.
Probably, yeah. It's an important record.
Yeah.
More Fun in the New World by X is kind of a weird one, but still worth mentioning.
Yeah, that's a strange X record.
Nothing major other than like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's like Bauhaus and like Cocteau Twins and some other weird
Pylon
stuff.
Who Nanny and Confusion and Sex are like way down the list.
Well, what album did we get?
So we got number 46 on the album charts, and it is Hüsker Dü, Everything Falls Apart.
If I listen to the things that you said, everything would fall apart. If I did all the things that you knew, everything could fall apart. Let's not listen to the things that they say, and everything can fall apart. Let's think about our actions, what we do, and everything will fall apart. I got nothing to do, you got nothing to say. Everything is so fucked up, I guess it's natural I play. Everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. If I did all the things that you do, everything could fall apart. If I listened to the things that you told me, everything would fall apart. Let's think about our actions, what we do, and everything will fall apart. If we do all the things that we say, everything can fall apart. I got nothing to do.
All right, first off, first impressions. What does everybody think?
This was my first introduction to Hüsker Dü
Wow.
when I was a kid. I had seen a bunch of punk kids with Hüsker Dü shirts and like patches and buttons and stuff. So I was like, I'm gonna check that band out, and just started chronologically. And I couldn't find a copy of Land Speed Record, so I was like, cool, I'll skip that one, and just started with this. So I obviously had like a very, like, before I moved on to other records, and they were thrashy, like they were a gnarly band. And then you get later on and it's like, oh, these are beautiful pop songs, but like,
Yeah.
it's a good first portrait. I love this one. I think it's a great Hüsker Dü record. There's some really, really good songs on there.
I want
Yeah,
to say the first album by Hüsker Dü I listened to was in Arcade. Just because
mine too.
what I had read was that like that's the big one. That's the important record.
Yeah.
So that's just permanently my favorite Hüsker Dü record. It's incredible. But yeah, when I decided to like really start to explore Hüsker Dü, I did kind of the same thing. I went chronologically. I went back to the beginning. I actually did listen to Land Speed Record first, which it's like pretty much just a live record.
Yeah, and it's pretty much just like
it is probably one of the worst live albums, like recordings I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But I didn't, for a while, the more I got into Hüsker Dü, the more I listened to later records. I did recently listen to Everything Falls Apart maybe a couple months ago on Spotify because it hadn't been on Spotify for a long time. And then I saw it one day. I was like, oh, cool. I haven't listened to that one in a long time. So I listened to it and I realized like I listened to this record probably more than their later record. Like everything after Zen Arcade. Like I think I probably listened to Everything Falls more than when I first started getting into them. I listened to this and Zen Arcade a shit ton.
Damn.
So this was like a big nostalgic rush to being in college and like just listening to this record on my shitty computer speakers in my dorm room. And
I feel like you can't even tell that your speakers are shitty with records like this. It's like, oh man, this sounds great.
Yeah.
This is really cool punk production.
Well, okay. So I may have the least experience with this record out of everyone. So I have like a different take, I guess. I've maybe listened to it once or twice before doing this show. And like this week I listened to it 3 times. So like I knew they had hardcore roots. And like I knew about Land Speed Record. And to me, when my true introduction to Hüsker Dü is in arcade, and I've only really dealt with the middle era Hüsker Dü the most.
Sure.
So like to me this was like, oh cool, I knew they were hardcore, and I went back and listened to it again, and I was like, oh yeah, that's hardcore for sure. So like history, I don't have a history with this record really, so to me it's probably not going to be one I go back to very often.
Sure.
Because that's just not what I go to Hüsker Dü for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. But that being said, there are a couple tracks on here that are like incredible, and like the title track, "Everything Falls Apart," feels like a later Hüsker Dü song. So
Oh yeah.
the melodies are totally there, and
Yeah. You
And
can
then-
see that, like, you can really see Bob just like wanting to write songs like, you know, like anything after this record, anything middle era, you know, like you can see him really trying to get to that point and break out of that, like, you know, like that, like every song before Everything Falls Apart is like, it just starts with that like drum hit, like, like
yeah.
like,
So one of the things we do on the show is we like to look at the trends, and so I try and look at each album as how it would relate to contemporaries.
mhm.
And so 83 is hardcore is, you know, the standard formula is kind of rote and, you know, overdone.
Mhm.
So this album totally feels like a band like, let's do our take. Like, let's really push the boundaries of what 80s hardcore, I mean, they didn't say it back then like that, but let us explore what 1983 hardcore is in our album. But they were definitely like, we don't want to do the same thing. We don't want to do 81, you know, LA hardcore, you know.
Right. We don't want to be Black
Let's-
Flag.
Right. Even though they were friends with them.
Yeah.
And I think they were also friends with Minutemen, and I think that helped, like, inspire them a little bit to be like, oh, we can do something different. Because the Minutemen, while always kind of classified in that hardcore scene, were their own thing totally. And so I think that they were like, you know, we don't have to just do the same thing.
Yeah.
Plus, they come out of the Midwest, which had its own sound for sure.
Right.
Like, at the same time as this record comes out, like, Articles of Faith have put out something, like an EP, I believe, and
The first
Naked-
two Replacements recording. So
And
like
then
this-
Naked
like
Ray Gun.
Sneak- Yeah, right. Like Naked Ray Gun. Like you got a lot of really solid Midwest punk
And
that
it-
is very informed by hardcore coming out.
And you know, and the Midwest has their own like a sharper sound. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's just more metallic sounding without actually being metal. You know, like
Right.
suicidal
Just
tendencies.
like production wise.
yeah, real crisp. Like it's just like real stark. I can't even think of the right words, but like that's, to me, that's the Midwest hardcore sound in the early '80s.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because, like, you've got, which we'll talk about this, I guess we can talk about the more tribalistic elements later, because the our EP we're going to talk about a little bit definitely fits within a tribal sound. I'll run through some quick little details about this album as far as personnel and all that. So this was their debut full-length. They were from St. Paul, Minnesota. This was released in January of '83 on Reflex Records, which was started by Hüsker Dü and producer Terry Katzman to just release their own stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which was pretty much what everybody. I mean, that's
Yeah.
like where SST came from. Like that's, you started a label because you were like, well, I want to put my stuff out.
Yeah,
Like
but they did
Discord.
wind up releasing things like Articles of Faith, Give Thanks, and Minutemen's Tour Spiel. So like they put some stuff out that was, you know, worth hanging on to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Recorded at Total Access Recordings in Redondo Beach, California, which is where a ton of SST's records, early albums were recorded.
Mhm, yeah.
Produced by Spot, who
Classic.
also, you know, I listened to a podcast. It was called like "Do You Remember," which is what Hüsker Dü is translated to in Norwegian, and they said that they expected SST to release this record. They like wanted it, and then when they got the completed record, they're like, "Nah, pass."
Yeah. I remember that from Our Band Could Be Your Life too. Like
Yeah.
and it kind of like was like almost like a heartbreaker for, like it was almost like a, well, fuck, like, should we keep doing this kind of thing moment for them? Like, because I think that Greg had kind of hyped up, like, yeah, we're going to put this out. And then they like sent him the masters. But in 83 for SST too, I mean, that's, like, he's already kind of moving. I mean, just in flag alone, he's already moving away from that. But then also, like, the records that SST was putting out in 83, like, it might have been a little too traditionally hardcore for him at that point.
Yeah. I read, they said something where they blamed another person for. Is there someone else involved in SST early on? Decision making?
Kind of Dukowski, Chuck, played bass in Black Flag. I think he did stuff too. I think at that point they were all just kind of like if you were in Black Flag, you were also an SST employee. Like, I think Henry was doing stuff for him too,
So I'm looking at SST releases from 83, 82 and 83. So like within 83, you get What Makes a Man Starts Fires and Buzzer Howl from Minutemen. You have Everything Went Black by Black Flag. You have a Dick's record and a Subhumans record.
Ew.
So
I forgot both of those were.
They put I listened to some of that Dick's record because I like to look at stuff that came out around the same time.
Yeah.
And it's a weird ass record.
It is. I love that record.
But it's just like, you picked that record over this. You picked the Subhumans record over this.
But
like,
see, that's the thing though. Is it's that like weird like bluesy, like it's almost like dad rock hardcore.
Yeah.
But that's what Greg Ginn loves. Like, Greg Ginn loves the Grateful Dead and he loves Jimi Hendrix. So like they cover, like, don't Dix cover Purple Haze on that record? So like of course he's gonna pick that. Which is crazy because the Hüsker Dü has that amazing Donovan cover on Everything Falls Apart too.
So I wanted to talk about that. So you really like the Donovan cover?
Oh, I think it's sick, yeah.
Song my window today. Couldn't took out easy, but I changed my way. Here's a good time to go in, but in a while you're gonna be mine. Know it, you're doing it style. 'Cause I made my mind up to go. And it's in the book, baby, that I can find. Everybody's hustling.
What do you think?
I like it. I think it's fun. I think it is a great early nod to Bob Mould's real obsession, and it really informs his writing process.
Who sings that? Doesn't Grant sing it?
I think Bob sings it.
Yeah, I feel I can't. The early days, their voices were like a little too similar because they're both just shouting, so I can't super distinguish. I feel like it's probably Bob.
I mean, it seems like something Bob would want to record just based on how much he loves 60s pop.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a really sick quote in Band Could Be Your Life about, like, I think he's talking about that cover particularly, but he's also just talking about how, like, he thought it was always really, like, elementary that the hardcore attitude is, like, burn everything down and start anew, and he was like, music is not like a city that you topple and then you become the new leader. Like, it's all informed. Like, all of your favorite hardcore bands grew up listening to 60s pop, like Ian Mackay loves the Monkees. They covered the Monkees, like Black Flag, they all take acid and listen to ZZ Top and Jimi Hendrix. Like,
I mean, if you go back to Joan Jett, like, half of her records are just 50s, like,
it's just doo-wop covers,
like, half the songs on the album.
Yeah. So he said, like, like that cover and, like, just kind of their, later on, especially that their aesthetic is really, like, album covers are getting, like, super psychedelic. Like, the Zen Arcade cover is, like, super psychedelic and, like, colored with crayons and stuff. They get back to that, like, 60s thing. But he said that was so intentional from the start because it was their kind of little middle finger to the, like, everything has to be stencil font on a black and white cover of a bunch of kids standing with leather jackets somewhere, you know.
Yeah. Personally, I didn't really like the cover. I thought, I don't know, to me it was just like, I'm not like huge into that song. That song's fine, but I don't know, there was something about how they did it. I was like, it was a little too rough for me. It's like, this feels like it should have just been a live thing, maybe. I don't know. And it has a weird placement on the record too. It's like early in it, like
Yeah, it does kind of cut like that. The first run of like, what is it like?
Well, it's the end of the A side, so
Yeah,
yeah, and I guess as far as an end of an A side, it works, but it like.
but you're coming off the blast of Punch Drunk, Bricklayer, and then Afraid of Being Wrong, and then it's like do 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 do. And you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. You know, I think I like the second. I guess it's the B side if you look at it that way.
Mhm.
The best. I think the second half of the album's the best because that's where everything falls apart's at. That's where Gravity is at.
Mhm.
That's
Target is great.
Wheels is great. Like I feel like
Wheels
the weakest
is-
tracks were early.
Wheels
Yeah.
is actually the only song written by Grant
On
Oh,
that
okay.
record.
on this record. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the weakest songs might be what? Blah 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 or
Yeah. Blah blah
Punch
blah.
Drunk. They just feel a little standard, like
I
a little
love
hard.
Punch Drunk. It definitely is standard, like run-of-the-mill hardcore. But Punch Drunk, I used to cover. I was in a band. The first like punk band used to cover Punch Drunk because
Nice.
that was like the top, like we could play when we played it as fast as they play it. We were like, oh man, we're like good. Like we were amazed that we could like like we were like, oh man, that's awesome.
And like, yeah, I guess it is sort of standard hardcore, but I would take this type of standard hardcore over like a majority of.
That's essentially what I did when I the first record I picked up was Everything Falls Apart. I was like, man, like I know a lot of people who don't really like hardcore that love Hüsker Dü, and it's strange because if all their records sound like this, then like what are they like pulling from it? But then you move on and you're like, oh wow, yeah, I see now.
Yeah, I mean they're almost completely different bands.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely. I mean, the
you could-
Replacements did the same thing. It must have been some like Minnesota thing to like.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
if
Naked
you-
Ray Gun went super melodic after what
No,
Basement
yeah.
record they did. Because that record's pretty rough. I have a hard time listening to that. That Naked Ray Gun record.
Not a lot of recall value on that one.
No. But you get to Jettison, and there you go. That's like a classic.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
It's only getting darker, and maybe moving faster. Well, it won't stop spinning, but how long will it remain? This impossible, the country on command. It's not to gravity, it's not to gravity. The tense keeps building. The changes are
Let me look at my notes here, see if there's anything specific about this record. Yeah, I think I hit all my big points. What, I guess we can, what's everybody's rating on this record? We'll go first so you get an understanding of what
Yeah.
scores we're using. Dylan, what would you say?
I want to give it maybe probably a 4.5.
Yeah?
The A sides, they're just a lot of those songs are a little like rough, like in terms of like rhythm, like
Yeah.
they're a little
In
shaky.
terms of musicianship.
And then
To me, they're a little tame.
the recording quality, is not what it could have been.
Mhm.
And if
Yeah,
we're
even
just
the
looking,
83,
if we're comparing it to what they did in the same year, I mean, this versus
Yeah,
Metal Circus,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I'd give it a 3.75. Like, I'm not quite ready to cross that 4.0 threshold, but it's I'm just not a huge fan of early 80s hardcore, and while they're doing it completely unique in their own way, and probably one of the best ways, it's still like really the same stuff, like a lot of scaling hardcore riffs and similar beats, and like, but I mean, like 3.75, yeah, that's where I stand with it.
I'm gonna say a 4.5 as well. I think that like I when they do the traditional hardcore, they do it well, and they do it weird enough, mostly just because Grant Hart is one of the weirdest drummers of all time. So you can't ever really get, like, even, you know, if they had done a Black Flag cover record, you still would be like, wow, that sounds like Hüsker Dü, you know, like it.
Yeah.
So for that alone, I'm going to give it a 4.5, just because when they do the traditional hardcore, they do it well. And then you get such a good peak. Not as good as Metal Circus, but you get such a good peak at where Bob Mould is going to be within the next, like, year or two, songwriting-wise. You know, there are moments on there where it's like, damn, this, like, you're almost excited to move on, because you can tell that as they made the record, they're growing.
Yeah. It's funny because there's like an like a Minnesota Public Radio podcast called Do You Remember, that like interviewed all the members of the band. That came out actually right around when Grant Hart died, and in it they would say, like, when they would play shows and they'd go record the album and they would stop playing the songs they just recorded, because now they're writing new songs and they're playing these new songs. So they almost did it like a stand-up comedian does, where you like road test all your material, record it, and then never use it. And then
it's done. Yeah, and then it's dead to you.
Yeah. So like people would say, like, why don't you play these songs? They're like, because we're writing the new ones. Like, that's why we're done. We used them.
You show up to hear Bricklayer, and instead you hear Diane. You're like, what is this?
And I think it's fitting that we went this whole interview with not mentioning Greg Norton's bass. But
yeah, I mean, incredible bass player. There is zero bass presence on this record. This record is all mids and treble. Like, it is all just like.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I hadn't done. I usually mention who plays on each record, and I forgot to actually do that. So
it's cool.
I guess I'll Bob Mould guitar vocals, Grant Hart drums vocals, Greg Norton bass vocals. There you go. If you didn't know,
it's the same on every Hüsker Dü record.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can move into our EP. Ooh, I'm excited to see people's take on this one. So we got number 25 on the EP chart, and it is SS Decontrol and their EP Get It Away. SSD or Society System Decontrol. It's a bad name. It's almost like they were like, hey, let's be edgy and be SS stuff. And
right.
They're like,
right.
But if somebody asks what it means, we can't be Nazis. He's like,
Society System.
And then it's almost like they were embarrassed, like, immediately, and they're like, let's just be SSD from now on.
Yeah.
I typically hate that kind of edgelord shit, but whatever. It happened all the time in the 80s.
Yeah, I think the not to excuse it at all, but I think that the context of it was so different then that it was like a thing that, you know, a lot of punks in that era were guilty of, like, shock value shit that now is seen as like an open statement of hatred, but back then was like, whoa, you know.
I mean, yeah, we've talked about this numerous times. Like, Joy Division's first EP has the Hitler Youth on it.
Yeah, man, a lot of Joy Division's aesthetic is like, damn, whoa, you're like really close to that. That sucks.
And the Subhumans logo, like, is bookended by SS's.
So like,
it's a thing. it sucks, and I'm glad bands don't really do it today,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah.
Unless you're just like shitty edgelord.
Right, unless you're
Um,
an actual Nazi.
Yeah, right. Quick update on that.
Speaking of
As I
Nazis,
was
Oh.
speaking of Nazis, as I was editing the episode that went up this week as of the recording, I was talking about the Beast Productions Instagram page, which are a white power record label, and they have 2 SS's in their names. On it, I called for people to report their account. By the time the episode actually went up, the account got pulled down, so I guess we did a good job of constantly reporting these white power pages on Instagram. So
Good job, listeners.
yeah, I guess we'll finish up some details here with the SSD. They're from Boston, Massachusetts, and formed in
Boston
1981.
Fucking hardcore.
This is Boston, not LA.
Yo, great comp.
They were a straight edge band, even though some of the members weren't always straight edge. Well, that's always the case. Isn't
Yeah.
Strife one of those like famous ones where like nobody's straight edge anymore?
I think if you dig through enough closets of straight edge bands, you could make that statement about probably 90% of straight edge
Yeah.
bands.
This is the second SSD album and was released in May of '83 on Exclaim Records, which was run by members of SSD. Who they also released stuff by the FUs, DYS, and Jerry's Kids, all Boston bands.
Oh, man, I was gonna say Boston. That's just Boston right there.
Yeah, they should just call it Boston Hardcore Records. The personnel is Springa on vocals, Al Baril on guitar, Francois Levisque on guitar,
Nice.
Jamie Sciarappa, there's Italian. It could be Sciarappa or Sciarappa.
how's it spelled?
And Sciarappa. Sciarappa?
Probably
Sciarappa.
Skyappa.
And Chris Foley on drums. He had the easy name.
Yeah.
I got the French one.
Yeah, you did great with the French one.
Record was produced by Lou Giordano and Mike. Here's another Italian name. Bastarace. I don't know. Whatever.
Whatever.
Why is Italian so hard for you?
I don't know. It doesn't follow the same rules as Spanish or even English, so Lou produced tons of records like Gangrene, Mission of Burma, Sugar, Sam I Am, The Goo Goo Dolls, Paul Westerberg, Taking Back Sunday, and the Ataris. So that dude had a long-ass career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. That's insane.
And Mike did a bunch of Boston hardcore albums, most notably This Is Boston, Not L.A.
Yeah, there we go.
And the album cover is by Pusshead, who is a pretty famous punk artist. So, cool. Jamie also played in Slapshot, so that gives you an idea of what this is going to sound like. What did everyone think?
I really like this one. This is probably the I really only with SSD I really only listen to Kids Will Have Their Say.
Yeah.
And so and like once it gets honestly after this one, like what's the Let It Rock or How We Rock?
How we
Yeah.
Let It Rock. I wish it was Let It Rock. Once it gets to How We Rock, I can't even like. And I love like bad hair metal, but like
That's what it is. Like,
yeah,
it's,
yeah,
it's straight up hair metal,
yeah.
glam rock.
I can't deal with it.
I do want to say I fucking love the album cover for How We Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cover is great. If only it sounded like the cover. The cover is great.
It looks like the best kind of like trucker rock from the 70s.
Yeah, yeah. When you
Just
see
like
the
Joe
cover,
Walsh
you're
solos and
right. Like I thought maybe it would sound like James Gang or like ZZ Top, but like informed by hardcore. But instead, it's just like bad Motley Crue. Like
Yeah. It looks like a BTO album or something.
yeah, yeah.
Or
Which would be
late-
cool. SSD,
70s
SSD with
Deep Purple.
synthesizers would be awesome. Like that would be sick. But that is not the case with that record. Anyways, off topic. The Get It Away is a really good one. I really only listen to Kids Will Have Their Say and really love that record. But this is a really, really good, solid portrait of what every single band in the Northeast sounded like in 1983.
So I was gonna say,
and they're the original. Like, it's all credit to them. Like, it's SSD's fault that everyone sounded like this.
Right.
But if you pick up any record, if you pick up any Exclaim record and any record that came from the Northeast, it just sounded like this.
Well, so I was very surprised at how much I enjoyed this record.
I was
because
too.
the only SSD I have heard was the early stuff. The Kids Will Have Their Say, and I'm not a fan of that record because that does the type of hardcore that I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. Every song is the same thing.
Yeah, it's just it's like motto hardcore. They find like one cool thing to say.
Yeah.
And so it's like you just do that over and over again.
So I was shocked at how much I liked this album, and I also didn't expect it to be as heavy as it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I didn't realize Al's voice was so like harsh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It really shows you like they were like rough dudes. Like it's one of those records where you listen to it. It's like the first Slipknot record where you listen to it and you're like, oh, y'all are actually legitimately crazy people. Okay, cool. Like I get it. Like you listen to this record and like you hear the lyrics and you're like, oh, this is like actual things. You've actually like had to stab junkies and stuff. All right, cool. Yeah, I can back this record now.
Dylan, what do you think?
First impression, I tried to listen to it on my way home from band practice last night. So I had spent like a solid 2.5 hours of like playing loud music. So I was not in the mood to listen to that.
So this was the last thing you wanted to hear.
Like I just quickly was like switched to like Springsteen. Just listen to like folky Springsteen songs. I listened to it this morning before recording, and I was way more into it. First
listeners,
couple songs, I wasn't. It didn't get me, but I feel like the B-side, it really got into a good groove, and I enjoyed what I was hearing. And I was surprised which of the vocalists on this record sounds like Patty from D4. Is that Al or is that?
I think that's Springer.
Is it Springer? Because there's clearly different voices.
Yeah.
On some of the songs, but
I truly don't know.
Springer has like one of the things that surprised me was like his voice was like a 90s hardcore vocalist. Like real harsh, like the type of like really screaming, where a lot of other 83 records are just people yelling at the top of their lungs.
Right.
So like it was almost I was surprised. It was like splashing cold water on me. I was like, whoa, this is not what I expected in 83. It's also the first album with Francois as their second guitarist. So I think adding a second guitar is what really made this record stand out, especially from the first one.
Sure.
I got a little bit of like early Ceremony vibes on this EP. Like you could tell Ceremony were influenced by SSD.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's
like,
100% accurate.
Those like faster songs where he's just kind of like rapid fire spitting out lines. It's just like, oh yeah, which aren't Ceremony like a Northeast band? Like are they a Philly band?
No, they're from Long Beach, California.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
That's weird. They feel like it.
That's where Roanoke Park is. That record.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I was really wrong on Ceremony then. But yeah, I was like, is this what SSD always sounds like? And then I listened to The Kids Will Have Their Say again, and I was like, oh, that's right. I've heard these songs. I don't like these songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never really listened to SSD because I mean, like, what I have heard of Kids Will Have Their Say, I don't dislike it. But like you said, it became the template for every other Northeast hardcore band, and I don't like most of those bands.
Yeah.
So I just never really listened to SSD because it sounds so much like those other bands to me.
Yeah.
I
that makes sense.
realized where that was our dislike for a lot of that is also so I still have my copy of American Hardcore by Stephen Blush, and while that dude's a clown and like his takes are wild stale, I always like to go look and see what he thinks of these early 80s records, and he spends for fucking ever talking about SSD and how awesome they were and how violent they were, and would always like get into fights and like cause like issues. And it was like, oh, that's right, I remember reading this book and going, I don't think I like these guys. They don't seem like good people.
I mean, that they do that for themselves. They do that same thing in American Hardcore, the documentary.
Yeah, that's right.
Like they're like most of the time that any of them are on screen being interviewed, they're talking more about how they were like factory workers and like fought people than they are like talking about playing music.
Like them and Gangrene are in that documentary. When they pop up on screen, I'm like, oh, get these people away from us. They're dangerous.
Yeah. I mean,
They're going to hurt somebody.
Yeah, they are.
They very much used music as a vehicle to fight.
Yeah, they're like hockey, and that shows that natural progression of hair metal, you know, like because they're just like hockey jocks that saw a bunch of kids in Nikes jumping on each other and were like, oh, sick. Like, what do we have to do to get in this? And play guitar? All right, cool. I will. You know, like
be real sanctimonious.
How many people that were in hardcore bands, including all of us, now exclusively listen to like Evan Dando and Bruce Springsteen? You know, like it's like it's a 10-year cycle that happens every time. Like
you can't really
90s hardcore kids, you know, like.
Can't really get into hardcore right now because it's on this like really ignorant
it's
beat you up vibe.
Right now, yeah, we're definitely in like middle 80s period, same thing. You know, like we're in a weird spot with it.
Yeah, there's a real big throwback thing going on right now too.
Yeah,
like 90s hardcore.
Yeah.
Like, I like a lot of those sounds, but a lot of these bands aren't doing anything unique either. Like
cool, your band sounds like Chokehold. I just want to listen to Chokehold. Like if I want to listen to Chokehold, I'll just do that, you know. Or
let's go listen to Snapcase. I mean,
If I want to hear a snare that sounds like a gunshot, I'll just listen to Snapcase or Helmet.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there are people who get it. Like, you know, the Riot Stairs dudes.
I was just about to say that was you took the words off my lips. Riot
like
Stairs are the only ones that are allowed to do that snare sound because they perfected it. Like
they get it. They're studying it. They're analyzing that shit. They're not just like, hey, we like what do you guys like? We'll do that too now.
Right.
Yeah. So like they were like, let's study this shit and like get it right.
Yeah. But, I mean, like if you talk to any of the members of that band for more than 10 minutes, like you'll know that like Issy has loved Orange 9mm since he was like 4 years old or what, you know, like it all makes sense that their band sounds like.
Yeah, and I feel like they're you know, in a couple of years they'll probably not even be doing hardcore. Like they'll take like a different route or something.
Yeah.
And
I mean, most of their side bands are like other things that they focus on are like really electronic based, and I think they have other interests and like that coming back to SSD, it's the same thing of like if your only interest is things that sound like that, your record is going to sound like that. So like SSD like only really got into it to like be aggro, and so their records were aggro, and they only listened to those aggro hardcore bands.
Which to me is shocking that they do a Buzzcocks cover on this record.
Yeah, and they do it really well. It's a good Buzzcocks cover. I've heard some shitty Buzzcocks covers, and that's a really good one.
I was just like, huh? Yeah, no, you guys are not the right band to be doing Buzzcocks covers.
Yeah. I like wasn't paying attention when I was listening to it, and I was like singing along, and I was like, why do I know this? And I was like, wait, this is a Pete Shelley song. What in the world? Like,
I wonder what Pete Shelley was like if he ever heard this, and if he was like, what?
Yeah, I wonder.
Who is this?
I would love to hear what his impressions of it were.
The cover rules. Like it's
one of the first Pusshead covers.
Yeah, and he's like synonymous with just like punk art in the
Yeah.
80s, and
I mean,
I was like, oh, this is a crazy good cover.
yeah, the cover is almost better than the content on the record.
Yeah.
But it's cool that is some of his early work, because I mean, he, you know, like without him, like what would people, you know, like hardcore, especially late 80s and early 90s, like he's responsible for like integrity, like everything integrity, you know, the logo, all of their art, like
Oh yeah,
that's so much of that is Putthead. He's
Oh, you know that
super-
Misfits stuff
The
too, and
Dynamite
Metallica
Darling.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like he gave the late 80s like thrash scene their look almost, like
Yeah.
him and the dude who did all the Megadeth covers.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can definitely see his influence on to like John Baisley from Baroness in his artwork.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I could take this time to look, because I was talking about tribalism in like the 80s hardcore.
Oh yeah.
And so this is what it made me think of while I was looking at their contemporaries, and their contemporaries who sounded like them were just all other Boston bands.
Mm-hmm.
And then it made me go down this sort of rabbit hole where I was like, okay, what was everybody's sound? So Boston had like that, like probably the heaviest sounding scene, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Like
either Boston or New York, I would say.
Yeah, they tend to go hand in hand to me.
Just
New York has
northeast.
a little more posturing, I guess, than Boston does.
Mm-hmm.
Boston's the guy you should keep your eye on, but New York's the guy who talks about all the shit he's gonna do.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna get checked by this hockey fuck over here.
Right. This guy's gonna barrel through me and not even notice.
So then DC, they had like the faster sound, maybe with Minor Threat specifically.
Yeah.
But then
It was mostly
originally.
just like 70s punk bed up
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and yelled over.
Yeah.
Yeah. LA had what was that? LA had the most formulaic, I think.
Yeah.
It was lighter sounding. It was, everybody just wanted to be Black Flag, I feel like, for the first 5 years of LA hardcore.
I feel like LA too was a lot of, I feel like age-wise, which informs kind of the same thing of dipping backwards. Like I feel like age-wise, everybody in the LA scene is a lot older.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you look at like Madball records and stuff, and like they were all like 16.
Yeah.
And like Minor Threat, the first Minor Threat record, they were all 15, 16, 17. And then LA, you see the Germs, and like Darby was 27. You know, Pat's like, I don't know, Pat in '83, Pat was already like 70 years old. Like, you know, and so they're dipping backwards into like art punk, and then they see how huge, you know, not necessarily the Germs, but other LA bands see how huge Flag is getting, and they're like, oh, well, we'll do that too, you know, like it.
And there's a ton of surfers too in the LA scene.
Right,
so like
ton of like druggy surfers. Yeah.
Which is why it's funny. There's not really a huge straight edge scene in LA hardcore at this time. It's all totally DC and Boston.
Oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. Midwest like had its working class vibe, but they were also really melodic in a lot of places. But then even like their guitar work was more angular. The Northwest had this weird like DOA, you know, like that weird metallic thing they were doing. Like they were almost doing crossover before crossover.
Sure.
Up there. Detroit had that Negative Approach, like.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only one I can think of is Negative Approach.
They like, I don't know, it's like you need a fist down your throat like that.
Yeah.
You're gonna get
Are Necros from?
They're in that area. Yeah, I think
I feel like
they're too.
they're Michigan something. So yeah. So like Negative Approach, Necros, like that kind of.
San Francisco had like the arty stuff. Like that's where a lot of art punk came from, and like the Dead Kennedys, who were barely a hardcore band, but you know they kind of fit in the scene.
Right.
The Southwest had a lot of weirdos, like
anything other than the Meat
boys.
Meat Puppets. The last great rock and roll band of all time, the Meat Puppets.
And what, MDC is down from Texas, I think.
Yeah.
all that scene has always been like a
So strange.
strange thing. The Dickies are down there.
Oh God, I love the Dickies.
It's just a weird group.
Butthole Surfers.
And then I was looking at the Southeast, and we have Corrosion of Conformity, and
Yeah.
that's it. That
Yeah.
represents the entire Southeast.
Yeah.
Who were the Florida hardcore bands in the 80s?
I really don't think it had like made its way down there yet. And I'm sure like if you dig really deep, I'm sure that you can find that there are bands from that area from the 80s. But I just feel like it was all so centralized in northern parts of the country. I mean, it's like
Well, it's very urban music. I mean,
it's definitely urban music. It's the soundtrack to, living in a concrete jungle where you're going to get stabbed on every other block. And that doesn't happen in Boone in 1983, you know?
Right.
That doesn't happen in Asheville.
like the Southeast, what they knew of punk was Joan Jett. I mean, like just the most mainstream.
Or like REM, like that, like kind of college rock
Yeah,
would have
that's
been,
true.
I think, would have been way more. Because if you look back at like 83 in North Carolina, I mean, you have like, you have the Decibels who are like North Carolina / New York back and forth every once in a while. Like you have stuff that is just going to sound like that, like Athens sound, like
Yeah.
REM recorded in Charlotte. Like I feel like that's Southeast. The further southeast you get is more of just that, like, we're all kids that grew up listening to the Sex Pistols, but instead we followed the ways of like the Jam and like Elvis Costello and stuff instead of going hard left like Sex Pistols, Ramones, Clash.
So I was looking, like, I was really curious about Southeast, like, hardcore, and I was like, well, there we have Corrosion of Conformity. Like, they were kind of a big deal. And even to this day, they're still a big deal. But, like, what else was going on? And so the only other one was, like, I could think of off the top of my head was that band, The Cigarettes, who were, like, these dirt punks, which I was like, oh, yeah, dirt punk. That's what we had here in the Southeast. It's just, like, these ugly songs that nobody really likes. They're just real kind of gross, and they're sloppy. And so I found, you may have seen this on my Twitter yesterday, I found this compilation called No Core, and it was from a record label in Raleigh called No Core Records. And apparently the Corrosion of Conformity guys said North Carolina hardcore was no core because there weren't any bands. Like, there was barely anybody down here doing anything. So they released a comp called No Core, and it has Corrosion of Conformity on it, and it has a band called No Labels, who were actually really good. It's two members of who later joined Corrosion of Conformity.
Of course, yeah.
No Rock Stars, and a band called Coldcore. Like, I didn't recognize any of these names. But the album cover for that No Core comp is a rebel flag on fire.
Sick.
And I was like, that's some heritage I can get behind right there. I really loved that cover.
That's really cool.
And I found a band from Winston-Salem called Subculture, and like I found their album on YouTube, and it was really good too. It was even kind of hard to describe. Kind of standard 80s hardcore, but they had odd chord progressions, and it took a little bit of that weird.
Never heard of this band.
Yeah.
That's cool. There was a band. Oh man, I wish that. I'm gonna sound so ill-informed on this, but there was a band that played an in-store at a record store up here, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I cannot remember the name for the life of me. But their like claim to fame was they were Richmond's only hardcore band, and like I listened to they have just one 7-inch, and I listened to it on YouTube, and it's just like straight up just like early 80s hardcore. Like, it's like kind of like you can tell they like didn't know how to use like amp distortion or anything yet. Like, it's like clean guitars, so it's like that, like the Black Dots era Bad Brains, like where it's just like straight clean Les Paul into something, like whatever amp they could find. But it's really cool. But I cannot remember their name.
If you give me a second, I may actually be able to find it, because I found a band from Richmond around this exact same time on a different no-core comp.
I bet that's it.
Called Why Are We Here? It's a little 7-inch comp with Stillborn Christians, No Labels, and Bloodmobile. Okay, that's not the one. There's another comp this record label put out. It was a cassette-only comp called Humiliation is Endless, and it had had Melvins on there. Weirdly,
Wow.
like it's not specifically in North Carolina, but
Sure.
there was a band from Richmond. Let's see if this is them. No, there's Fatal Error from California, Subculture from Winston-Salem. Was it Honor Roll?
No, hold on.
I just
gotta
saw
look it
this.
up now.
Kevin Collins from Subculture apparently was in Double Negative at one point.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Um,
So, and he was in some other bands too that they're more based out of other areas,
Yeah.
but he traveled around, I think. Graven Image, Honor Roll, Split, Richmond, Virginia, American Hardcore, 1983.
No, that sounds tight, but that's not what I'm thinking of. Hold on, I'm trying to just find the Facebook event.
There was a label called Eskimo Records
Really?
from Richmond. It just released these two bands, Honor Roll and Graven Image. Which,
Yeah.
wow, Graven Image, what a good name for like
Yeah, that's really
an
tight.
80s hardcore band in the South. Like, I just love the idea of like what were those hardcore shows like?
Right.
Because we know that like Bad Brains and Black Flag and Minor Threat all played in Charlotte at the Milestone, but
Yeah, and probably
Who
somewhere
else?
here. Okay, I've
who
got
else
it.
is?
It's l'amour, the French word.
Yeah,
And I guess I actually overshot a little bit. It said that their record came out 40 years ago. So
Whoa.
what would that be? 70s?
that's crazy.
So 79. So that explains the like clean
Yeah.
guitars and like because it's still in that like kind of transitionary period. But yeah,
Yeah.
they were a Southeast.
I mean, it's wild. I mean, there was Anti-Scene, like they were doing their thing.
Oh yeah, that's true. God, I forget they had been around that long. Good lord.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge Anti-Scene fan,
Yeah,
but
a little too Confederate for me. But
yeah,
I respect their, like I respect their place in the punk rock
Yeah,
history
the history.
world. Yeah.
I mean, they were important, but I do think they unfortunately inspired way too many bands in North Carolina.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's our SSD talk. Yeah, so went down this crazy rabbit hole yesterday, and it's I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Is there anything else we want to say about this record?
Not really. I think that I like I said, I feel like it's a really good template for all of Boston hardcore. I think I appreciate more on Kids Will Have Their Say. There are dips into like a weirder, like How Much Art, that like 7-minute like drone rock song.
Mm,
I think there's dips into weirder territory, and this one plays it pretty safe.
yeah.
So
Well, it is an EP too. It's only
yeah, that's true.
7 songs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7 songs in
did-
11 minutes.
I really enjoyed that song "Forced Down." I thought that was probably "Forced Down Your Throat" was probably my favorite song on the. on
Yeah,
this.
yeah, that's a good
EP.
one. And then the title track too is really good.
Yeah, it had that little reggae bass intro to it.
Mhm.
Well, what would everybody rate it?
I'd say 3.5.
Yeah, that's where I sit.
Yeah, honestly.
Like it's better than expected. Better than their contemporaries, maybe. Cool. You want any social medias you want us to follow?
Yeah, sure. You can follow since All Right, I just play drums in, and Gnawing is my baby. You can follow Gnawing at on every network now at Gnawing with 2 G's at the end, so Gnawing gigging.
Yeah. Nice. You got to get that. What do they call that? Symmetry. Social media.
Yeah.
Well, awesome then. Thanks a lot for doing the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas.
We tried to get you on a little earlier. I guess this year maybe, or it was maybe last year.
Yeah.
But we were gonna do the jam with you, but unfortunately, work got in the way of that. But
As always, truly.
continue to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We're at punklautopod. If you have an email you want to send us, it's punklautopod@gmail.com, and our website is punklautopod.simplecast.fm. Cool. Well, that's
All right.
a lot of fun, and Dylan can stop recording at any moment now.
It's a sign!